If you could just finish grabbing your tea and coffee, start to make your seats or start to walk up to the top, that'd be great. We're going to start in less than a minute, so if you come get a seat. Thank you, guys. 30 seconds before we start, so just come and grab a seat, that'd be great. Okay, guys, we're going to make a start down here. I'm just going to pray, and then I'm going to hand over to the panel to talk about this. Father, we thank you, Lord, for your word. Lord, thank you, Lord, for the encouragement, Lord, that we are not to be, Lord, ashamed of it. Lord, as we, Lord, raise and we teach our children, Lord, I pray you'd give us the confidence and the boldness of your gospel. Lord, we'd love it, Lord, if your word had every single answer to parenting, all the questions that our kids ask us, Lord, but it doesn't. Lord, because you've designed it so, Lord, we come and we seek you. We can have confidence in the gospel, but Lord, we keep seeking you. We'll do this morning. Lord, we pray for, Lord, the panel here, Lord, as they just share, Lord, their experiences, and they share, Lord, the way that you have worked in them and worked in their kids' lives. And Lord, just pray you give them confidence and boldness just to share, Lord, what you have given them. And I pray in all of this, Lord, you just give us grace as parents and as grandparents, Lord, to raise our kids up, Lord, in a godly way, in a way that just, Lord, shows your love and shows, Lord, that you, Lord, have a much better story in a much better way than anything else, Lord. Amen.
Amen. Amen. Well, thank you for coming to our little panel. To talk about parenting. In a moment, I'm just going to provide a whole load of disclaimers because I feel that we need to put some disclaimers in before we start. But probably worth just introducing our highly esteemed panel of, well, I can speak for half of the panel. They're excellent parents, outstanding parents, and then there's Helen and I. This is Tano and Angela. Tell us where you're from and where you're living at the moment, and just something about yourselves. Go on.
So we're originally from Sicily, Italy. Been in UK for since 2005. Here, 1, 2. Better. So hi, with Tano, Angela. We're originally from Sicily, Italy. Been in the UK since 2005 and live in Orpington and part of River Church.
That's good. Yes. Angela, what do you do for a job? Is that working? Is that not working?
I don't know if it's working. Is it working? Yes, it's working. I'm a TA, I'm a teaching assistant in a primary school.
Yeah.
And I love my job.
Yeah. Okay. And for those of you that don't already know, my lovely wife, this is Helen. Helen, what do you do for work?
For work, I'm a speech and language therapist. I work part-time in mainstream secondary schools.
Absolutely, good. And so we've got 3 boys, Nathan, who's 14, Ruben, who's 12, and Aaron, who's 9. And Tana and Angela, you've also got 3 children, and they are?
We have 2 girls and a boy. Gloria is 13, Sophia is 11, Matteo is 5.
Okay, and so here comes a set of...
Counting.
Here comes our set of... is this going to work? Is that going to work? Click, click, click. There we are. Okay, so just a couple of disclaimers. First of all, we are very ordinary parents who are making a lot of mistakes. I think it's really important that you understand that when we're talking about this, we are not by any means experts. We are not experts at all. And part of the thing that we want to sort of say is that we really want this to be a conversation and a discussion, and so we're going to actually have some opportunities for you to talk to one another and talk to each other, because we're just sharing what we've figured out so far and what seems to be working for us. We did think about trying to find parents who had parented kind of for longer, but when we talked about it, Matt, John and I, it was difficult to find parents who have maybe parented through this particular era of technology and bringing them out at this point. And so we are kind of stand-ins, and we're trying to share with you what we've learned, but please don't think we're experts. We are just starting a conversation. I think it's also just worth bearing in mind that we parent and raise our kids in London in a very city environment. Our kids all go to the same school, pretty much. And so that's just going to shape our conversation. If you're in a rural setting, or if you've got kids that are homeschooled, for example, that's going to, some of this is slightly different. And again, because of the age of our kids, our eldest kid is 14, we're focusing, because of where we are, the things we're talking about are really about pre-teen and younger teenagers. So I'm sorry if you've got kids that are like 17, 18, speak to someone else, John and Jana, they've got older kids, they'll be able to tell you how to deal with them, all right, okay? I think it's worth just saying as we start, the reason we wanted to have this conversation, this clicker's not working, Aaron, so you're going to have to click for me. It's parenting, this is a Star Trek quote, isn't it? Yeah, it's life, Jim, but not as we know it. It's parenting, Jim, but not as we know it. And I think we're all kind of acutely aware, aren't we? Maybe you're not, but I am, that parenting has changed a lot since we were kids. And I just want to highlight 4 things that have changed. And that is that we now live in a child-centric culture. I remember growing up, and I've got a few of my friends here that went to Eltham Green. How many of us remember being dragged to endless meetings, particularly in the evenings, and being told we were given a blanket and just told to shut up and sleep on the floor every Sunday night? Was that, John, do you remember that? Nowadays, everything revolves around kids. There's no point in complaining about it. It just is what it is. They've got toys now, look. And so that's been a significant shift. So kids are thinking differently, adults are thinking differently. We're also living in a world of, and I think John probably talked a lot about this in his session on sexuality. We're now living in an age where there's a fluid concept of identity. So whereas 50 years ago, identity was much more a solid thing. You were male or female, you were working class or middle class, you were English, it's essentially now it's much more, you can pick what you like. And that's made it much, I don't know about you, but I'm finding that a challenge as parents to realise that I'm trying to help my kids find out who they are in a world that's saying you can kind of be anything you want to be. And that's made it much more difficult for us. The other thing I think just worth mentioning is that when I grew up in largely a Christian society, a Christian moral society, whereas nowadays we're living in a very secular society. So our children are not being taught Christian values, they're being taught completely other values, very secular values. No point complaining about it, it's just significantly different. And the last thing, and probably the most important thing in some ways, is technology. How many of us have got, I'm looking at some of the babies here, how many of these children can operate an iPad? How old's Ethan now? He's like 2, and he's probably pretty fluent in technology. Technology has completely reshaped the way parenting works, doesn't it? And so we're just aware, and this is why we're starting a conversation, because we're aware that things are not the same as they were. And so, That's fine. Okay. So parenting has really changed. And so that's why we're starting a conversation, because nobody yet has really figured this out in any kind of level of depth. And so what we want to do today, is we want to just talk really around 3 areas. Is this going to... Aaron's now trying to... Look, it's all falling apart. Oh, I haven't turned it on. That would be why. It's good. Oh, there we are. Cheers. Let's see if I can get this to work. So I think what we want to work through, and we're going to just share with you, we're going to have a bit of a conversation, then we're going to invite you into that conversation, really around three themes, which is being awake and aware, examining and evaluating ourselves, and then how do we build relationship and resilience with our children. And so we're going to have conversations around those three themes, and we're going to break after each of those themes. But this is one of the key things we want to just communicate, is that there's a difference between being an involved parent and an intentional parent. Lots of people are very involved in their kids' lives. They go to sports games, they go to, they go to school performances, they are, like to do things with their kids, and they're very involved. And that's great. But there's another level of parenting, which is about intentional parenting, which is saying, what is it my children are facing? What is their personality like? What's their character like? What do I need to do intentionally to make it easier for them to really find Jesus, to find the gospel, to receive the gospel, to find Christ, and to grow up in a mature way? And I think if we don't intentionally parent our children, the world is intentionally parenting our children for us, right? The world is deliberately, absolutely, unashamedly seeking to indoctrinate our children into a way of thinking and a way of believing. And if we are just passive and go, well, we just be supportive and encouraging, I'm afraid that there's a danger that our children will essentially grow up with the values of the world rather than the values of the gospel. And this isn't just about traditional Christian values, this is about the gospel. And so, again, what we're going to try and do is just talk about our experiences of this. And so the first thing we want to talk about is really this whole idea of what it means to be awake and aware. And I think that we're all... So let me just hook this in. I think we're all aware that one of the things that's happened, hasn't it? Let's move to you guys. Hello now. I've stopped talking to them. I'll talk to us. One of the things that we're particularly aware of is just that our children now, I just talked about technology, are more exposed at a much younger age to things that we were never previously exposed to. Parenting has shifted. Can you give us, I don't know, maybe Tana or Andrea, can you give us some examples of maybe how what you've kind of has almost shocked you or made you think, whoa, that was way more information than I think my kids needed to know at this age?
I think for me, the first kind of realization was when Gloria was in year 7, came home talking about this app that they were encouraged to use, which is an app where you can anonymously ask any question about any topics. I was like, oh, that's interesting, let's check it out. And it was basically this just river of issues and topics that obviously as an 11-year-old we never really addressed with her. And all of a sudden it was just unfiltered, and her eyes were open to, everything, from sex to anxiety, mental health, and it was, and this app was just loads of questions and no answers, or no answers that I would give, and I was like, wow, it's here, and the gates are open, and they said can't contain it anymore. So that was my first kind of realization that of the overexposure of our kids.
Yeah. What about you, Andrew? Can you think of other things?
Well, school that doesn't help, because there's a lot of Gloria comes home with a lot of questions about everything and anything. So I think for us we had a lot of questions. We're not ready, and we had to answer, and we thought it wasn't time for her to know yet, and obviously we had to sit down and talk about it. So I think school is one of the biggest problem that kind of throws, has a lot of info, and these kids are completely confused, and they come home and they don't know what to, to.
I think we often, when a few years ago, we would talk about, like when we first had our kids, we were like, we must block all the internet, because the internet's going to be a really dangerous place. But actually, we found it's the school, isn't it? I mean, talk about Nathan, wasn't it? Didn't he come home on day 1 or day 2 of school?
Yeah, day 2 of secondary school, and asked me what rape meant. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's been tough, hasn't it?
Yeah.
Do you want to elaborate on that? Or just?
I just think at school they just get so much. The conversations that they hear is just information that we never would have had, and even with another son, You know, when I was younger, I might have thought, oh, that girl's a lot prettier than me. You know, she looks nicer.
No, she's not,
than
darling.
me.
She was never prettier than you.
Oh, thanks. Good answer. Well done, well done. But yeah, I might have had those kind of questions. But I wouldn't, you know, but one of my sons was talking to me, again, only in year 7, and was saying, you know, oh, maybe I need to go on a diet, you know, I'm not, and I remember thinking, I never even knew about dieting at that age. I never knew about eating disorders at that age, but now they just have all this information, and yeah.
Yeah, and I think, I didn't mention this at the beginning, but I think one of the things we want to do in this conversation is try and just create a sense of collective, like, oh, it's not just me. Because I don't know, and this is why we're going to have a little bit of a chance for you guys to talk to each other in a minute, because I think one of the things we can feel very isolated, like maybe it's just me that this is happening to, and maybe you've got other stories, but also we can feel very guilty, like, and fearful, like, am I getting this right? And I think part of what we need to do is we need to feel less guilty sometimes that we're maybe not getting things right and not doing it. So I think one of the things we talked about when we had a conversation is with all of this exposure that happens, and I'm sure there's other things we could list, you know, technology, you know, we found our kids, you know, you watch an advert on YouTube, don't you? Like, you know, where the kids flick from YouTube to YouTube, and all of a sudden it's like, and it can vary from like women's feminine hygiene products, which is a 12-year-old boy, they're like, you shouldn't need to know about feminine hygiene products. But it can be really quite, you know, exposing stuff, and they're just watching, you know, YouTube videos that are appropriate and approved by us. But even so, adverts can be quite damaging. But I think sometimes we talked about the fact that there can almost create a danger, can't there, of us becoming then overprotective of that. Have you identified within yourselves where you can maybe we can be a bit overprotective as parents? If any of you got any examples of that?
I think because we're adults, and at least this is my experience. I've, you know, come from a different generation. I've kind of learned how to navigate life. I can kind of go under the radar, and I think there is a danger of I'm just going to bury my head in the sand, and this is not happening. I just want to shelter my kids from all of this and myself. Whether it's putting parental controls on your Wi-Fi or every device, or just not talking about it because we don't want to make it a thing at home. But I think for me the importance is I'm the first person in the relationship, parent-daughter relationship, parent-kids relationship, that I need to be awake and aware. We were saying before, almost like one step ahead of what my child is being exposed to, so that I can understand it, scrutinize it, explain it to them, or protect them from it. But there is a danger, of being overprotective and not giving them the tools, I guess we'll talk about it later, but the resilience to deal with that risk or that danger of what is out there.
That's what I think it's also important to make sure you tell the kids if it's something you never heard about it before, or you don't know how to answer. You said, I'm going to go have a look at this, and we're going to talk about it. You know, I'm going to go read about it myself, and we're going to talk about it. And, you know, we're not going to, I'm not sure about this. Just, you know, we'll see. We'll see how it goes. We are intentional. We tell kids we are not sure about this. We never come across when we were young. So let us go have a look, and, you know, and we talk about it as a family.
Yeah. I think there's a real danger with being overprotective, actually, is that, and I think we talked a lot about this, that if you're too overprotective, there's a danger that actually your children are not prepared for it and not prepared to deal with this stuff. And so when it comes, so if we're too overprotective, they'll either do one of two things. They'll either not cope, and they'll just kind of freak out and panic, or not be able to deal with it. Or alternatively, I think, and this is what happened, I think, to a lot of people in my generation, is that they just went the other way. And they were like, well, you've been overprotected so much, and we've been sheltered and protected and not allowed to do things, that, I mean, I remember quite a few of my friends, the moment they hit university, like, that was it. They were like, right, brilliant, no protection now. I'm going to do all kinds of crazy, stupid stuff because I don't have any sense of resilience. And I think that we have to be awake and aware, don't we, to just how if we're not careful, we're too overprotective, aren't we? You know.
Yeah, and I think the other thing with being overprotective is actually you can end up putting more fear into your children, because if my kids are going out somewhere, I might then talk about every eventuality that could possibly happen and what to do in each situation, and then at the end of it I think actually I've just really freaked them out about all this horrible stuff that could happen, which is really likely not to happen.
Yeah.
You know, there's a difference. Obviously you want to give information so they're not naive and things. There's obviously sensible things to put in place, but I recognise in myself I can go too far and basically put more fear into them than...
Yeah, and I think that's a great point, because we're oversharers, both of us. By nature, we prefer to talk about things than not talk about things. And so I think we're aware that, you know, that actually we're almost making our kids almost too aware of something, aren't we, at times? I think...
I was going to say, I think though for girls it's a little bit different, because obviously for boys, it's a little bit easier to go out and about. Girls are aware that if you are out, you need to be aware that if there's a white van, and there's boys whistling at you, then you need to be prepared. And Gloria is, for example, she's ready to know how to escape. She can tell you, I run the opposite direction, I go to somebody's house, I knock, I tell them to help. She's prepared to all those possible scenarios.
You've also armed her, haven't you?
Yes, I've armed my daughter with alarms and pepper spray in her bag when she goes to school.
So if you upset Gloria, right, if you don't know who Gloria is, just be careful, because you never know, you might get pepper sprayed.
But that's because obviously, she knows that there is these kind of things happening. She knows that if she has a ponytail, she has to take her down, because it's harder for a man to grab her by the hair. So obviously things that boys don't worry about as much.
Yeah, and I think this is... Oh, go on, were you going to say something?
Well, I was going to say, this is the kind of stuff that they get taught at school.
Yeah.
Which, again, for me was... I was like, oh, wow, okay, you know what catcalling is. You know these things about ponytails and, how to get away, or... So again, for me, it was kind of, again, a sort of a wake-up call. I need to be sort of awake and aware and understand the world so that I can have that conversation with my daughters and kind of say, it shouldn't be like this. This is kind of a broken world, and then kind of go into the inspiring mode. And this is where you're going to make a difference, and bring in the gospel into all these places. But yeah. But they are. If we're not having that conversation as parents, they're getting this info and teaching at school anyway.
Yeah. And I think if I can cite my John at the back, there he is. I know that, for example, one of the things that John did was there was a set of books that he wasn't sure he wanted his daughter to read, so he read them first. And then said, okay, you can read them, but I've read them and I can have a conversation with you. I'm awake and aware to what's going on. And I'd say things like, make sure you get those kids' English books that are coming home from school. We had an English book that was written that the kids were getting really into. They were starting to talk about it. Obviously, it was a brilliant book, brilliantly well written. It was actually about apartheid in South Africa, which was good. It was good that they learned about that, but it was about parental abuse, and then it was about this girl that then found love and acceptance in a lesbian relationship. And it's like, this is like their set text. They have to read this, they have to analyse it. It's what they're doing in school. So you have to be awake and aware, I think, to what your kids are actually reading in school if they're there. Again, if you're homeschooling, I used to be like, I didn't really understand, I'll be honest, I didn't really understand homeschooling until more recently, and I can really see why so many people have made that decision, because it is, some of the stuff that comes out of schools is challenging, but it's the world that they're going to grow up and live in, so it's fine. We're going to just ask you, just briefly, find someone next to you, and obviously maybe it's a little bit different for Peter and Mickey who are sat there, maybe it's not quite so relevant for you, but what have you seen, what are the things that have happened in your experience as parents? What have you noticed? What are things? How are you thinking about being awake and aware? So if we can just have just a couple of minutes with people around you, that would be great. And then we'll call you back and move on to that next section. No. Hey. Angela. Well done, very good. That's great. No, all of you, very good. Yeah, very good. come across. Hello, gorgeous. Are you okay? It's too good that time.
Yeah, that's fine. Do you want to start?
Her way of putting her mind at rest about gender identity is all this is real recent, very subtle the way we introduce these things to the kids. We've got a dazzle for them, and there's books in there where you have maybe a girl with a headbow on, and we show how easy it is to move that into a boat. So we start to show how easy it's to transition these kind of things. So it's celebration of diversity and all sorts of stuff. It's like, right, I'm not trying to say something like showing those kind of scenes is normal to a 5-year-old's brain. She had no idea what was going on.
Back on. I'm going to give you about 30 seconds to a minute just to finish your conversations. Them. I think Pete shared a really interesting story with me about what had happened to him and with one of his children who's in reception and essentially coming home in reception being told it's now okay for me to marry a boy in reception. And so it's so important that, I mean, I was thinking that we're talking about pre-teens, but you realise this stuff's now being communicated very young, isn't it? So I think we want to move on, if we can, to talk about really how we respond to this. And I think before we talk about how we respond, I think what we said was we felt it was important for us to examine and evaluate ourselves. Because I think if we're not careful, we bring out, we've certainly felt, I mean, I know I've had conversations where, because I'm so worried at times about what my children may be thinking or feeling, I actually, in a sense, put my own fears onto them. Or I actually kind of create something, and I'll share with you, we just thought we'd share our own failings as a parent and how we're reflecting on it. But I suppose I realised my boys have got really into cricket, because obviously it's an amazing sport. And that's why I've not been certain about going on the XCC, because cricket and XCC probably not the same type of people. But they play a lot of cricket, and cricket's one of those sports where it's very obvious if you're doing well or you're not. In football, you can run around and look busy and be useless, but if your team's doing well, it's fine. In cricket, if you get out, you're out. Like, you know it, right? If you bowl a bad ball and someone hits it and smashes it, you know. And then they put all your stats now on the internet so the kids can read their stats. But I suddenly realised how kind of competitive I am as a parent, and how I so want my kids to do well. And I realised, essentially, that I was putting a lot of pressure on my boys. and because I'm competitive, and I was like, and it's an ugly part of me, you know, it's an ugly part of you as a parent, and I was just really aware that actually that I'm in danger of always suggesting improvements to my children. Like seriously, like my boys, they are good, aren't they? They take after their mother, not their father. But
true.
I realised that I was in danger of being so always suggesting improvements that they were always essentially disappointed, that they felt I was always disappointed in them. And I'm aware that if I don't address that in myself, they're not going to be able to talk to me about things that they're struggling with or when they make a mistake, because they're going to be so afraid that I'm going to be disappointed in them. And so I'm having to reflect and examine and evaluate my own parenting, because if I don't reflect on myself and my weaknesses and what I'm bringing into my parenting, I'm going to create problems that, although the world is bad, it's me that's making it more difficult for them to actually kind of work it through. Because as we'll talk in the third section, relationship is so important. And often we are too controlling, we're too critical, we maybe have, you know, unhealthy conflict, we're worrying too much. And if we don't think about that ourselves, we're going to make mistakes that are going to affect our parenting. So, I mean, Tano, do you want to share maybe about what you've reflected on in your parenting?
Yeah, I heard this really good analogy where someone was saying if you live in next to a factory and the air is really toxic, and your kids get sick, you're not gonna get angry with them for being sick, and that's sort of that awareness and understanding that we live in a toxic society, and sometimes we see maybe our own mistakes or failures reflected in our kids, because we were saying parenting is almost like a mirror, and then you're like, oh my days, you're just like what I was as a teenager, and you have the first response, it's either having a go at them or getting angry or just getting really panicking, and I think that's my weakness is. As a teenager, I was probably a bit of a tormented soul.
Tano was naughty. I heard stories about Tano in his youth. He was a bit of a bad boy, weren't you, Tano? That's why Angela was attracted to you.
Yes, there was a bit of a naughty streak. But yeah, a lot of, I don't know. I guess my fear that I'm aware that I may sometimes put on my kids is that they're going through the same sort of mental struggles that I maybe experienced, and I'm always like checking, are you happy, are you happy, are you happy, and they're like, or I'll say, are you being bullied? I'm fine, just get off me. But yeah, no, I think it's like especially when we're talking about, you know, the sort of the big issues of growing up, and how parenting is a mirror of maybe areas that you need to find healing or freedom in, or even just understanding and processing your own childhood, whether it's trauma or but I was listening to a podcast where they were saying if you find it difficult to talk to your kids about sex or relationships, or what healthy relationships look like, is maybe there's something that you've not dealt with in your own past, and that's gonna come out in your parenting. It's gonna happen one way or another, and I think that's why it's good to be in a healthier environment in church, or doing things like we've done Freedom in Christ a couple of times because we needed it, but it gives. Yeah, if you've worked through your own issues, then you can hopefully have that kind of healthy conversation with your own kids.
I mean, you were reflecting, weren't you, on your parent? I know you're an amazing parent, obviously. I have to say that. Perfect in every way.
No, not at all. Yeah, just so you know, I took over watching some of the cricket matches because it wasn't going down too well. Mainly because I don't understand cricket, so it's all right, because I just clap and smile at whatever the children are doing. Although the low point was when Aaron told me, my youngest son, that I'd clapped when the other team had apparently done something good. But anyway, It's all good. Being serious, thinking about myself, I think one of the loads of things I could pick from. I'll pick one. I think one of my biggest things is I think I can be a bit too interfering, kind of. I think because because being kind to others is quite important. Teaching the boys to be kind to others and treating others well is quite important to me. Sometimes when there are kind of situations in friendship groups at church or with their school friends, I have a kind of tempted to jump in there and try and help them fix it and kind of help them manage what they should be saying and doing. And actually, you know, they need to learn. Obviously, you need to guide them, but some of that they need to learn and make mistakes, and so that they can navigate those social relationships when they're older. So I think, I have a tendency to be a bit too interfering.
And Angela, you're perfect?
Of course I am. You know that. Well, I'm lovely. No, it's not a problem. How do I phrase this? I tend to be a little bit strict. And my children know I'm a parent.
I think scary is a word.
It's not scary. Maybe a little bit. So my children know that they come to me is black and white. They know where I stand. They know what I think. So I kind of have to remember once in a while that I have to be a little bit softer. I usually don't succeed with that, but I do tell my kids if you know that I might get upset, but then I'm open to talk about it, and I do that because I have strong views and I love you, and so for me, I try to remember though that because Gloria is very much like me. She does the same thing that I do, and she's right away, attacking, like, what's the problem? What did I do? So obviously she's the mini version of me. So I have to remember that when she answers like that, it's because that's what I would do. And so I have to remember that, reassuring her and say, I'm not upset with you. It's totally fine. I'm interested in who you are. I love you. And, so like I try to remember that, what I would do if I was in her shoes, because we're exactly the same. Yeah. So
exactly. Sometimes when you're really strict, isn't it? Almost you get into this. Your children are worried about getting wrong. You tell us the story about the text message.
Oh yeah. So last night I was texting her. I said, once MLG is finished, it'd be nice to spend some time together. And her first answer was like, why? What did I do? What happened? And I said, nothing. I just want to spend some time with you. But why? And I was like, just because I love you and I want to catch up with, She was like, oh, okay, then that's fine. So, it was a bit of fear in there right away.
So we're going to ask you to break again just to maybe talk. And again, I think it's thinking, I just want to say this. Tano touched this briefly. If you have, and I'm not speaking to anyone specifically here, but I know that in my pastoral experience, lots of people, or not lots of people, but far more people than I think we often realise have suffered quite traumatic things in their childhood. And if you've had that and you haven't processed or dealt with that, it will affect the way you parent. And so you need to make sure that you're talking to one of your elders or really mature Christians who you trust, because it will affect you. Either you'll be fearful because you'll be fearful it's going to happen to you, or etc. And again, if you are naturally, we're good communicators, because did anyone ever do the marriage course? Did anyone do rhinos and hedgehogs? We're both rhinos, so we just charge. You wouldn't think that about my wife because she's very quiet, but the moment the caravan door shuts, and some people can attest to that, having seen that in reality. There's two different women, really, isn't it, darling? And but we're both very good communicators. We've counselled quite a number of couples over the years. Not everybody, in fact, lots of people are quite poor communicators, and maybe your parents were poor communicators, or you naturally feel awkward. Right? We were talking about the fact that, like, one of the first questions that Tano and Anja had to answer, in fact, we had to answer, was what's a 69?
That was after 1 week at
school.
Gloria.
Now, if that makes you feel awkward, right, you're going to have to, find a way to get over that. Right? Yeah, because if you want to engage with your children in a meaningful way and you want to build that kind of relationship, you've got to recognise that awkwardness, examine and evaluate yourself. I've got to find a way to be less awkward when my kids ask me that question. Because if I kind of look like a rabbit in the headlights and then kind of panic and don't say anything, or just say like, oh, talk to dad, or then, and I know it's obvious, but it will mean that, okay, I can't talk to my parents about this. So they'll go to talk to their friends. And if we know anything about the Bible, when Rehoboam, right, had a choice between talking to his friends or talking to the people that actually knew what they were doing, he talked to his friends and made a total mess. And so it's good. Anyway, so tell the person next to you how awful you are. Go. No, you talk about your weaknesses very quickly. Things that maybe you think you might be bringing into your parenting.
Just remember the childhood anecdote when I asked my dad.
Just come back together. Well, you can obviously... Oh, sorry. You just finish your sentence. It's good. Okay. So we're going to move on to just our last heading, really, which is, okay, so we're aware and awake to what's going on. We're examining and evaluating ourselves and reflecting on our own challenges. Well, what's the next stage then? So the next stage that we came up with is building relationship and building resilience. Yeah? And these were three ideas that we kind of, when we were talking, we were like, these things are consistent that we do, we're trying to do anyway. The first is that relationship isn't the only thing that's important. Obviously, they need to have rules, they need to have structure, they need to have controls on their phones, but relationship is the most important thing. Of everything else you do, no internet filter or anything else is good enough compared to relationship. I used to do lots of safeguarding, safeguarding stuff in schools. And in the end, you realise you can't protect kids from the next thing and the next thing. You can't block every dodgy website. So what you have to do is have a really robust relationship, because that's the only way you're really going to help solve that problem. And the second thing that we talked about is this thing about giving freedom to make choices without fear of making mistakes or shame or failure. Yeah? And I will talk a bit more about that in a minute. And lastly, and this is particularly that process between going from being kind of, say, like 9 to, say, like 14, 15, is that transition from being, I'm going to teach you what you ought to do, to I need to train you how to handle it. Do you know what I mean? And so it's that switch from teaching to training. And I think it's just worth adding in here that, like, grandparents, it's lovely to see grandparents in the room, because I think grandparents have a significant role to play in this. And maybe I'll kick off with something. We're just going to share some ideas around how we built relationship. But if I can just pick up on this second point, giving freedom to make choices. So talking about cricket, Nathan plays cricket. He's in the under-15s. And the problem is all of his games were going to be on a Sunday. Now, the other age groups play on a different day, so the other boys could play, and it was fine. But he was only able to play on a Sunday, and so we had a very good conversation about giving him the freedom to make a choice. I said, I will take you when I can on a Sunday if you want to go. It's your choice. You can choose if you want to go. I said, but you're going to have to make a decision that cricket's more important than the Lord. And I felt it was a moment for him with his relationship with the Lord. I'm going to support you, and I'm not going to be cross with you, whatever you decide. And I want to give you a week or two to think about whether you'd rather play cricket on a Sunday for this summer. It's only a few months. You can play cricket, or whether you'll go. And as part of that process, talk about grandparents, I said to him, go and talk to your grandparents. You know, you've got 2 godly grandparents, you know, like godly men in your life. Plus, Pat is youth leader, our friend. I was like, you can talk to me. I think God will bless you. And this is a moment that God's giving you to say, I'm going to choose God. And what's really interesting is he made the decision to not play cricket and go to church. And I think it's become his testimony. So over the summer, that's been his testimony. I felt God challenged me to make a choice. And I've made a choice myself. And so it was giving him that freedom in the context of relationship to have choice, but also recognizing that I'm parenting with my parents and Helen's parents and the wider church community. Go and talk to them. So that's kind of one way that I've been building relationship with my kids. What have you guys been doing? Tano, you've got 2 girls. You're a man or a dad. It's important to have. How have you been building relationship with your girls?
Again, I think it's about being intentional and just picking moments and opportunities to, sometimes if I have the chance, if Gloria is at home from school earlier, I'll say, should we go and get something from Starbucks? And then I try to being intentional in trying to remember like our friends' names. Sometimes I'll have to make a note of, who said what, and the school drama. And
if someone picks up that notebook, they're going to be asking questions as to why you're writing lots of notes about 12-year-old girls. But yeah,
sorry, mental notes. But hopefully it's communicating that I'm interested, that I'm listening. Or even sometimes, if, especially with working from home, I work with headphones and I'm aware, the moment that Gloria Sophia will come in the room, I'll take my headphones off I'll try to engage and right away ask about their day. But yeah, even if we just go for, get a coffee or a hot chocolate. Well, I get a coffee, they get a hot chocolate. But I'll say, all right, this is our date. Thank you for coming with me. Thank you for talking with me. But I'll try to make it a point of saying I really treasure this time together. And and I don't take it for granted that you're telling me what's going on in your life. And then throughout the week, if I see a song that I think they'll like, or I'll send it to them, or I'll text it to them, I'll send them the link. But yeah, I always try to be sort of present in the moment. Obviously, not perfect, but showing interest. It was easier when they were little because you can play stuff. You know, you can do things together. Oh yeah, we would when Gloria was competing in gymnastics. I would, you know, it was like our tradition that as her dad, I would give her flower after a performance, and obviously, it wasn't like the Olympics or anything, but it was just, you know, yeah. But showing that appreciation and or celebrating little things like end of school or making a bit of a fuss over them. And I think something that we always try and do that our parents didn't, I don't know how, but by the grace of God, I think we're fairly good at it, is vocalizing things like I'm proud of you, or you're beautiful, you look, I really like your new haircut, and hopefully, you know, instilling that, that confidence.
That's good. Helen, what about you? What have you've got 3 boys.
4 actually, because you're the worst of the lot.
Thank you, Jill, for applauding that so vigorously. Yes. So how are you building relationship with three boys, not 4?
I think for me, the biggest thing really is, I mean, it's really obvious, but I'll say it because it's, I think, for me, really important, but you probably already know it anyway, but it's time. I just think particularly with one of our boys who's naturally much more anxious personality, and through primary school, you know, most days didn't want to go to school. You know, I'll probably spend a lot of evenings, you know, by his bed an hour every evening just chatting, and he's will hold things in a bit more. He's not a natural kind of communicator or express how he feels. You know, and I'll just spend ages there saying, it's better out than in, it's better out than in, I'm not going to leave until you tell me what's bothering you. And yeah, so it was just loads of time. And I think as they've got older, sometimes they do, 2 of them can talk for England like their dad. But yeah, just kind of, and hanging out with them, watching the TV programs that they like to watch with them, and yeah, just kind of that kind of thing.
Yeah, I think the other thing we were saying, weren't we, as we were talking about this, is that one thing, the problems, particularly with teenagers, I don't know if those of you that have got older teenagers in the room, they never talk at convenient times. And it's always like the other afternoon, like Nathan had some relationship issues, not his own, other relationships. And I was at that point in the afternoon where all I wanted was 10-minute nap. And I was lying down on the bed. He was like, Dad, can I talk to you about some big issues? And it's like, I just wanted to go to sleep. I've got to try and stay awake here to talk about this. And I remember this was something my dad did incredibly well, didn't he, Mark? He would quite happily talk to us until 1 in the morning. And I think sometimes that like we were saying, like you've got to just be prepared to grab whatever, the moment comes, be in it. And I'm bad at that, because I'm bad at being in the moment. I'm always in whatever I'm doing, and I'm having to learn, again, examine and evaluate. Sometimes I'm so busy trying to do what I want to do that I don't realise that moment's a moment. And I think, and be prepared to talk till like 1 in the morning on the kitchen, sat on the kitchen worktop or something, you know, when it's cold and you want to go to bed. But yeah, that's something.
I think, I wanted to add something. I think for us, with our girls, it's very important. We always, usually the girls tend to come to me first and tunnel for relationship problems or, you know, drama or whatever. But I always make sure I tell them, you know, we talk about it now, but I will talk to your dad and we all talk about it together.
Yeah.
I think it's important for them to see that it's not just mum, but it's mum and dad that do it together.
Yeah.
The dad will know what we're talking about. There is not just us two having a secret conversation. I'll tell you what to do, or I'll advise you, and daddy might be thinking differently. I think it's important for kids, for girls especially. For us, it's important that girls see that we are in this together. They shouldn't be embarrassed to come with any kind of question, even in front of the dad.
Yeah.
So I think that's quite important.
Yeah, we were saying, weren't we, that it doesn't happen as often as I'd like, but we'll often kiss in front of the kids.
Rarely, because we rarely kiss.
But no, seriously, and cuddle and kiss in front of the kids. Not because that's actually something we do very often, but just again showing them that actually it's okay to be affectionate. It's okay to us to see that and see that in front of our kids, really, isn't it? And I think that's quite important, really, isn't it? Just to kind of just pick a few practical things at the end. I just want to say we've adopted the policy with our kids in terms of resilience is their phones have to stay downstairs and not allowed upstairs. So we don't let our kids take our phones upstairs, maybe, and not in bathrooms on their own and things like that. But also, we regularly go through our kids' phones, read the WhatsApps. I know that there's this kind of something, it's theirs, it's private. Maybe it will change when they get to 16 or whatever, maybe they get a bit older. But right now, it's like nothing in their life is private, sorry. And so much of what I talk about being awake and aware, I've become awake and aware because I'm like, oh, that's what this person's saying. That's what we will regularly. So I would say to you, if you do not do this, I know if your kids haven't got phones, but I would say to you, you need to get into it early, right? I know your passcode. I'm in charge of your phone. Your phone is a privilege that you're using, and I see it. And I think, to be honest, I've had a much better understanding of what's going on in my kids' lives, and then be able to actually help talk it through with them because of what's going on the phone. Can I ask you, Andrew, one of the things you guys did, particularly when the Black Lives Matter stuff, talking about that again, you spent a lot of time just sitting around watching films.
Yeah, well, they had lots of questions, because obviously it was a big thing. And so we sat with them and watched some movies that obviously had similar topics. And then we sat down and we talked to them and said, what do you think? Based on that, how do you think it was fair or unfair? And we know they enjoy watching movies, so we thought, let's grab something that they enjoy, and we get something out of it that actually is more than just watching a movie. Yeah. So that helped.
And so just one question that I think we all want to know is, why did you take your daughter to Gay Pride?
Sorry. Basically, well, wait. I was... we were going down central London to the theatre.
She didn't, by the way. I've just totally made that
to the theatre, and it happened to be Gay Pride. It was all through central London. There was no way we could have avoided. And obviously, my girls were like, "Oh, we shouldn't be here." And I said, why not? I said, there's nothing, this is the world. We're not running away from it. So I said, we should go and have a look, because it's important for you to see it. And that actually sparked lots of conversation about it, and, about what it was, why are people protesting. She saw there was some Christian protesting as well, with a banner, and we talked about that. And I think it's important not to run away from it. And, I didn't want them to think, that's a no, we go away. I said, no, let's have a look. But I knew they were safe because they were with me, and it was a great way of talking about it.
Absolutely. Have you got something you want to add?
Well, I was just thinking, just in terms of practical tips, which we mentioned, but it's just encouraging. Something that I'm learning is just to push through that barrier of the awkwardness, or even barrier of I'm really tired, and I don't. Because this is something that you're really good at, is like Helen, you're relentless. You're like, I don't think we've got to the bottom of this. And it's like midnight and I just really want to go to bed. And you're like, I think we just need to dig a little bit deeper. Well, and something that you always say,
I don't accept the answer, I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know.
I know that if you're upset, I know that deep down you do know. So I'm going to stay here with you. And I tell them, I'm going to stay here until you tell me. There's no, you have no choice. Because when you said to me, I don't know, I know that you really, really do know. And if you come to me to say, oh, I feel upset, it means you do want to tell me. And so we're going to stay here until we talk about it. Yeah. And I know that if I don't do it in that moment, it's a lot easier in few days for them to just, move away and think, oh, it's fine, I don't have to talk about this.
Yeah.
So you have to grab that moment, and I think you need to push through.
Absolutely.
And another practical tip is you've asked Gloria to write down all the questions or text me all your questions, and then we'll go through them. So just to give them also that time to reflect and think, okay, what is it that I want to address or even bring up? If we've upset them, or if there's something that they want to raise and it's a bit scary to do it face to face, write it down, text it to me.
Yeah, especially if it's something that she's even embarrassed to ask, or it's something that she's worried that we will not understand if she asks us face to face. So she writes it down, and then we have time to read it and then go back to her and talk about it.
Yeah.
And so we said, there's nothing to be afraid of. Just tell us, we love you, no matter what.
And I think that's the whole thing about, giving them freedom to have conversation without fear of shame or making mistakes. And I think that's just so much. I'll finish with this story, as I think it's quite amusing. When Tanner had a question to ask his daddy when he was little,
I think I was probably 11, and I went home and asked my dad about what masturbation was, and he told me to go and ask the priest, who told me to say like 10 Hail Marys. So I still didn't know what it was by the end of it. But yeah.
It's good. We've got to finish there because time's run out. As I said, hopefully what we've done is start a conversation. These are just things that we're working through. We by no means got it figured out. We'd love to hear from you. We would have had time for a bit of question and answer, but we've run out of time, mainly because Angela wouldn't stop talking. No, joking. She'll beat me up for that later. I'm actually scared of her. But yeah, if you haven't got any questions or any comments, please come and see us. And hopefully that's been helpful. So thank you very much.